All right, guys, so welcome back to the shack, and today we're going to be here to kind of go over the most asked question I get every week. Well, maybe the second most asked question. The first most asked question is, what kind of machine do I need? But this is probably the second highest ranking question I get, which is, what materials do I need to get for my new laser? And I get that a lot, guys. So today I've got a bunch of materials out. We're going to kind of go through what those materials are used for, what they're, which materials are good for this application or that application, and just kind of throw it all out there in hopes that maybe some of you, especially the ones that are new to this, can kind of glean some, understanding of what the materials can do. And for those of you that's been doing it a while, who knows? You may discover a material that you hadn't been using. So stick around and we'll be right back. All right, guys, so to start with, in this episode, we're going to discuss blue diode lasers. The blue 450 nanometers lasers are probably the most common hobby lasers that are out there. And for most beginners who would be asking the question about materials, that's what you're going to have. This is going to include such things as the Xtool D1, all the way up into the laser pecker, the blue diodes, any of the lasers that have the blue lights. Like I said, those are going to be what we're going to be focusing on today. If you're interested, if you have other machines and you want me to do more of a detailed deep dive into the fiber world or CO2, let me know and we'll go that route. But I get this question mostly from folks that are new to the diode world and haven't got a whole lot of experience. And I know this is one of those questions that you would think there would be, it'd be kind of self-explanatory. But if you look at it, there's not a lot of content on there about the scope of all the different materials that you can engrave with a blue diode. So I thought hopefully this video will, fill in that gap and help answer some of those questions for those folks that are new and help you figure out what kind of things that you would like to do with your blue diode laser. So I've got a table full of things over here, and guys, just a little waiver here. This is some of the things that I do. These are some of the more common things that are out there. It's not all of them. So if you have another material that you think you want to engrave, always consider a couple of things. Know what's in the material. Know the risks involved, whether it be flammability or toxicity. Because some of these materials, especially like vinyl, PVC, some of the plastics especially, can be very, very nasty. If you breathe them, they can be poisonous, and they can also be highly corrosive through the release of acids and stuff like that to your machines. So be careful with the materials if you're experimenting. Do a little research to try to make sure that you're safe and you don't tear your equipment up. But today we're going to be going over some of the most common materials that are on the market and kind of let you know where I think they stand and the way that I use those materials. So let's jump over to the table. All right, guys, so one of the most common and probably the most widely used mediums with the blue lasers is going to be wood of some sorts, guys. You have a lot of different types of wood. So we're gonna start, and keep in mind, guys, these materials, as we're going through them, your 5 and 10 watt machines are gonna be more ideally suited for engraving, whereas they can cut. They're just not gonna be real fast at it. The 20 watt and above will be able to kind of do both. Now, they may not have quite the precision in engraving as some of those smaller machines, but just kind of a sell-off. It's kind of like when you're buying a vehicle, you got to decide, do you want fuel economy or power? Because typically you're not going to get both. So kind of the same thing with lasers. Do you want engravability or cutting or somewhere in the middle? So we're going to be approaching this, and I'm not going to be giving you any settings because I always, guys, the best way to get your settings for a material, buy some extra, play, do some testing. Yes, it costs money, but that's the only surefire way to make sure you have the correct settings. So one of the easiest to work with, and I guess probably best looking woods in many cases, is just straight up thin sliced material. This is some thin sliced black walnut. Then luckily I have my own sawmill, so some of this stuff's pretty easy to come by for me. And some real thin oak. that I've been playing with. And you can see I cut some stuff out of it, just doing some testing. So with wood, typically you're gonna have like the natural grain material such as this. You're gonna have plywood. And guys, also to understand how lasers work and how different materials are affected by them, you kind of need to understand the composition of them. So this is 100% plain, no additives, no preservatives. This is just wood, okay? This stuff's gonna cut relatively easy, relatively clean. The things that come out of it are gonna be the things that naturally occur inside wood, as far as the smokes and the vapors and stuff like that, okay? The second, probably the most common in laser engraving type of wood material is going to be plywood. All right, plywood is made up of several thin layers of material that are glued together and usually glued together under a lot of pressure, which makes it a really dense, strong, kind of resilient to breaking plywood. Thus the word plywood. It's made out of several plies. So the thing with plywood to remember is, typically with the lasers that we use, you're going to be staying somewhere between 1/8 of an inch material and 1/4 of an inch material. You can go higher, especially with the 70-watt machines that are out now. But typically speaking, you're not going to do a lot of that. You're going to be between 1/8 of an inch plywood and 1/4 of an inch. One thing to remember is just because you have 2 1/8 inch plies or 2 1/4 inch plies, that's not going to necessarily mean that both plywoods are going to cut with the same power settings. The thing you got to remember is the type of wood is going to be, you know, a harder wood is going to be harder to cut. A softer wood, of course, easier to cut. Also, the number of layers, because the number of layers is going to increase the layers of glue. The glue doesn't always cut as well as the wood. Typically, it doesn't cut as good at all. It's like very resistant to being cut. So the more layers, thus more glue you have, the harder the wood's going to be to cut. Also, there are such things as materials that come pre-finished. I have some of those. They're really awesome when you're painting things, but that finish also adds another level of resistance for the laser. So keep in mind, the more specialized your materials, like this latest material that I've been using, it's a really cool material. It's a plywood, thus, you know, it has several layers, but it's also pre-finished, which is cool. I like it because the cleanup is easy. The soot doesn't stick to the material. I don't have to worry about sanding it. It has a lot of pros, but with those pros come the cons of it's harder to cut. It takes a little more power to cut through this stuff. But as you can see, it's a very slick, very smooth finish. All I have to do is spray it with a little rubbing alcohol, wipe it down, no soot, there's no cleanup. It's awesome. I like the stuff, but if you're somebody that has a 5 or a 10 watt machine that doesn't excel at cutting, you're probably going to get a little irritated with this stuff because it does take about twice the power, which means it cuts at about half the speed of what unfinished regular plywood will. So those are things to consider when you start adding things to your plywood. This material that I use is just a 1/4 inch Luan material. Cuts really easy, cuts soft. Cuts relatively good, engraves well, as you can see by the engraving. The thing with this stuff is, though, you do have to clean it up. I mean, it does, when you engrave it sometimes, especially if you're using air assist, you'll get a little bit of that scorching and you'll have to sand it and clean it. You can't simply spray it with something and wipe it off, because if you do, it's going to soak into the wood because the grain and the fibers of the material haven't been sealed with like the pre-finished stuff has. So it's a little bit of a different animal, but if you have a smaller machine that's less powerful, this is a lot easier to cut. So that's something to consider when you get into the plywoods. The more the layers, whatever those layers are made of, the more glue, it's going to change the cutting dynamics of it. But plywood by far is my favorite material to work with. It's kind of that middle realm as far as being able to get it. The thing with, like, let's say the natural materials, you're not going to be getting this stuff in a 36-inch wide sheet. Not likely. Not just natural material, because for one, natural material that wide typically is going to curl, it's going to warp, it's going to twist. There's a whole lot of complications that come with material that is not plywood. Plywood, because of the way it's made, it doesn't typically warp as bad as natural material, but it will warp. So You're also going to want to make sure you keep that material flat. But the other and third, and around my place, the lesser used material for lasers is MDF. Now, with MDF, I will tell you this. Cutting it, remember what we talked about earlier, natural wood is just wood, plywood is wood with layers of glue. MDF is sawdust with a whole bunch of glue. And so what that ends up giving you guys is a really stable material as far as it doesn't twist, it stays flat, it's relatively consistent. If you paint it, it's going to be the same color, it doesn't have grain. It has some pros for the material. Cons, it's really rough to cut with lasers because the majority of it is glue. It's a little bit of wood and a lot of glue, okay? So that's the problem you run into. The other concern is, of course, the more glue you have, the more concern you have for what's in the glue, i.e., chemicals such as formaldehyde and stuff like that. And with MDF, that's a chemical that is really, really prevalent among MDFs. It's getting better, but in years past especially, there was a high concentration of it in some woods that were brought in and so forth. So those are things that you need to consider too, is what's in the wood. Like I said, with MDF, the one benefit is you don't have any grain. There's no grain to contend with. So if you're doing an image or something that you really don't want that distracting grain to show through from the material like it will with other woods, because with other woods, the grain does affect ever so slightly the image. I mean, and it's hard to see in some of these. I picked some pretty good ones. I picked some bad ones for showing the grain effect. But you can see right there in the little chicken, you can see how the grain kind of affected the outcome of that image. If that's a problem for you, if that's a concern, MDF may be a better option if that's what you're going for, is a really crisp engraving. Because with MDF, as you can see in this photo that I did, and this is a picture that was taken from a deer camera up on top of the hill from my house. And all I did was throw it in light, burn it on a piece of MDF. As you can see, MDF is really good for pictures. That's about the only time with lasers. Now with CNCs, different ball game, but with lasers, photos are one of the few times that MDF can be my go-to, especially if I'm trying to get a nice image like this. And if you do the settings correctly, guys, you can literally make the image kind of raised and almost like that 3D effect, because you can remove the material and dig it in a little deeper, and it's pretty cool. It's something cool to play with. So photography, if you're doing a lot of engraving of photography, some thinner MDF might be something you want to try. But those are the three main categories of wood that you're going to be using for your lasers. You're going to have the natural woods, you're going to have plywoods, and then MDF. There's other options out there, such as panels of put together materials that I use for stove covers and stuff like that, which is a natural material as far as engraving goes. But because those boards are put together, there is a layer of glue in between them, but that doesn't typically cause a problem. So whenever you're engraving stuff like that, I just treat it as just natural wood, because for the most part, other than that one little glue vein down through there where the boards go together, that's really all it is. It's just natural wood glued together on the edges. So that's about it for wood. So let's get over here to the table. I'm going to show you some of the things that I've got, and we'll go over a few more of the mediums and just kind of hit the hot spots. All right, so before we move on, guys, there is a kind of a demonstration of what you can expect with like a natural wood with the grain. You can see how the grain interacts with the engrave. Now, me personally, for this application, for just doing a logo, I think it's pretty cool. Okay, but if this was an image and this wasn't something that I wanted to happen with that image, that's where I would go to something with a little less grain or either some MDF. So I just thought I'd share that with you. That's actually laser cut. It's a 3/4 inch piece of pine cut with a laser, but this is not, cutting 3/4 inch material is not something I would advise you to do on a daily basis, but it is fun occasionally. So a lot of the other stuff, guys, that you can do, metallic stuff. All right, with the blue diode lasers, you can remove coatings from materials. One of the most popular things that you can do with a blue diode on materials, especially like non-wood materials, is tumblers. But as you can see, guys, doing tumblers takes a lot of testing. So what you're doing in essence is you're heating up this material, the coating on the outside of this tumbler, and you're removing it. There are, like especially with the orange, you can actually blacken the material, and you can even go hot enough to blacken the material underneath it. But it's all going to come down to testing. But typically speaking, with tumblers, most people are going to go for the whole remove the material and make the cup shiny approach. That is the easiest, most effective way with tumblers with a blue diode laser to get the look that you want. Now, you can do them all sizes. These are some that I do on the X2 S1 over there. These are the ones, the big ones with the handles. A little more complicated because you got to take the handle off, but they're fun. So that is one of the probably, other than wood, that's probably the second most common material that people do with blue diode lasers. So moving on down, I would have to say with blue diodes, not necessarily with CO2s, but with blue diodes, the third, I would say, material that I like to play with, and I feel like it's probably the most common, it's going to be anodized materials such as these. All right, these are the tags and stuff that goes on vehicles as well as business cards. And with those business cards, you can, for the most part, with a blue diode laser, you're going to be doing the same thing you're doing with the tumblers, is you're removing the black or whatever color it is and exposing the aluminum. But we'll throw this in here because I know some of you may have the F1 or the laser pecker or some of the dual diode machines, and even the new ASMR that comes with the infrared module. So if you have our capability on your machine, whether it's a Galvo or in the case of the ASMR, one of the modules, you can engrave on these black business cards and do a pretty awesome job with these things. And these are a fun little medium, especially if you have, say, a F1 or a F1 Ultra. This one was actually done on a MOPA, so it's a little bit of a cheat, but you can do similar results as this with IR modules or IR capable machines such as the F1 Ultra, the Laser Pecker 4, Laser Pecker 5, those guys. Even the 2-watt IR module that goes in the X2 S1 is capable of marking these anodized materials. And they're really fun to play around with. And if you haven't seen it, I've got the business cards and stuff and the car tags. I also do those. Another material that a lot of people like to mess with is stainless steel or coated stainless steel. And you can do some pretty cool things even with blue diode lasers on stainless steel. The whole, being able to get color consistently. Yes, you can get color. Can you decide I want to get green and actually make that image turn green? It could happen, but I'm not good at it. So just know that that's not something, if you have expectations to be able to do that on command, be prepared for a steep learning curve and lots of luck to be able to pull that off. But the possibilities are pretty limitless, guys. With the appropriate technique using a diode laser, it is possible to etch clear acrylic also. That's a whole video for another thing, but clear acrylic, you can etch glass, you can etch, probably for the blue diodes, the most fun that I have with anything glass is going to be mirrors. And I enjoy playing around with these mirrors. I've got one that I keep right over there, this backlit in here in the shack. But you can get these little mirrors really cheap, and on either a blue or an IR machine, you can take and come in from the backside, remove the reflective material, paint those things, and make some pretty cool designs. And then with a little bit of wood, you can make a little wood frame like this, have a cool little desk sitter or shelf sitter or something like that. Great for little holidays or just, things around the office. If you got that person in the office that you want to make a little sign for, or whatever the case may be. It's just a neat little project that's really cheap to make. These mirrors aren't that expensive, and the wood, like I said, you can design however you want your own frame, or you can go over to my Etsy shop, buy my frame. It's, whatever. But in the wood realm, guys, there's all kinds of ready designed, ready-made cutting boards out there. These are some like acacia boards that come off of Amazon. I've got others such as bamboo and so forth. And that's one thing that we didn't talk a whole lot about is bamboo. Bamboo technically, although it's very wood-ish, it is basically a grass. But it's a pretty good little material to be engraving on. I make a lot of stuff out of bamboo as well. And a little prototype that I'm working on here. But bamboo's pretty handy, and you have a lot of keychains and stuff that are bamboo handled, spatulas and so forth. Acrylics. A lot of people ask me about acrylics with their blue diode lasers. And guys, if you're planning on doing acrylics with your blue laser, let me go ahead and save you some heartache. Stick with black acrylic. That's the only color acrylic that you're going to be able to cut with a blue diode laser with any success. And I'm not going to say that you can't pull it off, but it's going to be messy. It's going to be a pain. It's going to take a lot of turns. Your cut is definitely not going to be smooth. It's just not worth it. Stick with black. If you must have a color, red is probably the second best color that I have found to be able to cut with a blue diode. And then orange would be behind that. But if these materials have any type of translucence to them, it's not going to cut. Okay, it's just going to melt or make a mess or just do nothing. So black acrylic is going to be your go-to for the blue diode lasers. If you're wanting to cut acrylic, guys, go check out somebody's CO2 machine. That is going to be the way to go. None of the other hobby machines on the market are going to satisfy your need to cut all kinds of acrylic. It's not going to happen. So with the diodes, stick with black and you're okay. Any other color, bless your heart. Just, I mean, have fun with that. Let me know how it works out. But the world of lasers, guys, one more thing that some of you guys, if you're new, I'm going to go ahead and tell you. This is another rabbit hole that you can get caught in. What glue do you need? Do you need wood glue? Do you need Gorilla Glue? Do you need super glue or CA glue? Do you need Loctite spray adhesive? And the answer is, guys, depending on what you're doing, you kind of need them all. And throw in a glue gun, a hot glue gun to boot, because you're going to eventually go down this rabbit hole. So far, you're going to need all these glues to hold all of these different materials together, because every application, every project you do, regardless of what it is, you're going to have to stick some pieces together more than likely, and depending on what it is and how it goes together and where it's going to be placed, it's going to determine what kind of glue you need. Now, I will say wood glue and CA glue, if you can only pick up a couple, go ahead and grab those too, because those are going to be your most common glues, are going to be wood glue and CA glue. One of the other things that you're going to want to pick up to go along with your adhesion kit for laser engraving, go ahead and get yourself some green painter's tape. And green because it can be used for testing cylindrical objects and stuff like that, and it doesn't reflect the blue light as bad. And it just when you're using it to do test burns and markings and stuff, it's a lot handier than the blue. So with those materials, you're also going to want to learn how to, do stuff like such as this right here. This is a pre-finished plywood that I painted with some Rust-Oleum in a can. And it turned out like this. My wife didn't even realize. She's like, what material is that? Because it really looks kind of cool. But what this is this is a one-side finished plywood, and I have cut all these pieces out, painted them individually, and then put them back together with some glue and gave this result. Yes, you could, if you wanted to, sit and paint this with a paintbrush or whatever. I'm not that skilled, and I don't like painting with a paintbrush. And so I choose to take these, cut them out, spray paint everything individually, let them dry, and then just drop them together with some glue. For this application, you could use either wood glue or CA glue, depending on your flavor. But I think on this one, I just used wood glue because it is putting wood together. Now, the one thing that I have learned, and I will pass along to you, if you're using this pre-finished material right here, be aware it can have negative effects on your gluing. So if you're using the pre-finished and you're gluing pre-finished to pre-finished, or if you're gluing anything to the pre-finished material, it can prevent the glue from penetrating into the material and giving you as good of a hold. So in those situations, if you're gluing to the pre-finished material, you may want to be generous with the glue just to make sure you've got enough surface area that even though the hold may not be as strong, you have more of a surface area, therefore the overall strength of the connection is better. I have had to go back and redo a couple of glue ups because of this. So passing that on to you guys. But there's all types of materials, and guys, when I travel to events, this is my little blanks box. And I'm going to share this with you. We're not going to go down too far down the rabbit hole. If you like these type of material videos, let me know. The plywood was just kind of one of those things that came up. People kept asking, what kind of plywood should I get? What should I look for? Which is better? What should I get for this? And so I just kind of wanted to throw a video out there to kind of fill that space. But when I travel to events, this is my box of blanks that I have. There's all types of materials out there that you can get that are ready-made. These little leather keychains right here. These things are pretty fun. They're pretty popular so far. I haven't really like just cleaned house with them. I've only took them to one event so far, but at that one event, I sold several. I probably sold enough at that one event to pay for the whole box. So that's good when you can get your blanks to pay for themselves first trip out. These are some more of the little leather, fake leather keychains that I have. And they engrave pretty well, the different colors. Like I said, you got to get out there and try stuff, guys. What works in my region, in my area, at my events, it may not work at yours, and vice versa. So the only true way to know is to get out there or talk to friends that are in the same thing and see what they're doing. These are pre-made little wooden keychains, mostly made out of what I can tell looks like either bamboo or some type of other Asian wood. But they work pretty well. They engrave well, sell well. Oh, I forgot about slate. Slate is one of those materials, guys, that, especially for coasters and stuff like that, it's pretty easy and pretty forgiving with either a blue laser or an IR. So, yeah, you can put that on the list of things that you can do as well. And like we were talking about earlier with bamboo, they make most everything out of bamboo. So there's some bamboo pins. I do those at events. I've got tons of stuff, guys. These are dog tags. These things I do with the IR, but guys, they sell like crazy. So you've got to understand that the market, like I said, certain things are going to be hot at certain times of the year. There are, things that people buy, like impulse buys and so forth, that are really good pretty much year round. Anything small that you can stick in your pocket tends to go pretty well. And this is what I was actually looking for. Reason I sparked getting this thing out. And these are little metal bottle openers. And I've actually got an order for some of these. So I'm going to set these over here to the side. So use your imagination, guys. I got lots of videos on lots of other materials. Some of these materials in here are more for IR machines. You can do them with the diodes, but they're more for IR machines. But just let me know down below. Would you like for me to kind of go through the different materials and what they're good for say, the other individual machines, or just like the spectrum? Because I don't feel like I should do one for X-Tool or one for Laser Picker, because the machines are basically using the same light. They're using the same basic principles. The materials are the same. And as always, testing, you're going to need to do that on your own, okay? I can kind of give you a ballpark, but to get the best results, always test, guys. I mean, I have to test, and it gets expensive sometimes. But if you're not pricing your jobs to where you can absorb your testing costs, then maybe you need to look at doing that, because you will get a lot better product, and you will have a lot less stress, because you will know that that setting is going to be the best setting that you could possibly get for that object. And the testing time that you get to do also will help build confidence in that material, so that you're not nervous when you burn those first 4 or 5, because you know how it is, guys. You get something in and you're like, man, I'm going to mess this job up. And for the first 4 or 5, you're like, oh Lord, this is bad. But then you kind of get, you get used to it. You get the swing of things. Of course, that's usually when something goes wrong and something messes up. But hey, that's part of it. But being able to test or having extras in case you do mess up is very, very valuable. I've got some tumblers I've got to do this weekend, and that's always a possibility. Something could go wrong, whether it be the machine messes up, software messes up, or good old human error. Something is probably going to happen. But let me know. I feel like we're getting to the point now where I'm just going to be rambling about different materials. But as far as the basic understanding of what materials are good for a diode laser, I feel like hopefully you could, get a little information out of the video. So let me know in the comments down below if this was helpful to you. And if you have another video that you'd like to see, as always, drop it in the comments, send me a message, let me know. I like to try to come out with content that helps you guys. And I try not to forget, sometimes it's the simple things when you're first starting out that really make the most difference. It's been a while since I started out in lasers, but I try to remember that. So hopefully it helped. Let me know. But till next time, guys, be safe and have a good day.